Welcome, welcome very much to Conversations. A pleasure to welcome to the program a young lady who we've met a month or so ago and is going to be our guest for this hour. And her name is Josie Maynard. And welcome, Josie, very much to the program. She is a filmmaker, and we're going to be showing some clips from a film that she is going to have a screening of at the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the people who, among other things, hand out the Emmys. I think a real serious organization in terms of television. But we're going to be talking about that film and about her background. And Josie, welcome so very, very much to Conversations Manhattan Network.
Thanks for having me.
My great good pleasure, dear. I wonder if you could, it's a template we use, sort of, if you would share your background, where you were born and raised, a little of your education, and then we want to talk, because you've become a filmmaker, and and we want to talk about that. And of course, we're going to show some clips and talk about the film. But your own background, born and raised and educated a little bit. Education.
Okay. Well, I was born. I don't know if I've grown up yet. A lot of people would argue that point.
Thank you. I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I'm trying not to myself.
It's a good idea. I don't think I ever will. I'm happy with that.
All right. Peter Pan.
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
A little bit of that.
Yeah.
I was born in Houston, Texas, and raised in a small town outside of Houston called Pearland. I left Pearland about a week and a half after high school because I knew that there was more in the world, and I wanted to see what that was. I was very curious about the world around me and people and different cultures.
How about the family setting? You're going from being born to high school, there's a lot going on. Was the family setting a warm, good one, and was it there? And I understand you actually ride horses and herd cattle and do that kind of thing.
I do.
Your site is called COWGIRL, I think. Yeah.
COWGIRL Media Inc.
And how was the family setting and everything as you were growing up?
Well, I have 3 siblings. We're all tight.
Good.
Really tight with my parents. My
Wonderful.
dad, we were asking about riding horses. I was actually there last weekend working cows.
Working cows?
Yeah.
Like out of the movies, right?
Kind of.
Right. Okay, and your dad is like that? They ride in the saddle?
Yes.
Okay, we're from Manhattan, it's, a little bit, okay, good.
Yeah, so he's a cattle rancher.
Yeah, okay, very good. Yeah,
and so I joke, because I get to go down there and do it, a few times a year and just kind of put my toe in the water and have fun, but he has to do it every day, which he loves doing, but that's a lot. That's a lot, so.
And you have other siblings in that, and was intellectual things and so forth encouraged around the dinner table? Was it an encouraging environment? And then you went to school there, at high school, and so forth, or?
Encouraging in what way? As far as
intellectually encouraging, were you talking about something other than just mundane around the dinner table, or was it intellectually stimulating? Was it?
I can't say it was intellectually stimulating. I mean, I had 2 brothers and a sister. My 2 brothers had belching contests at the table.
Oh, wow.
Which they would get in trouble for.
The All-American belching contest. Something Mark Twain could do great with, right? Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And my older brother made me very tough. So, I mean, he was more rambunctious, and he was very challenging to be around physically growing up, as far as playing football with him and sports. And I grew up playing sports too. I played basketball. I played a lot of different. Basketball was my first love.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were athletic?
Oh, sure. Good. And I ran track and other things. So.
And then you went to high school, and then did you go into the university track? We used to call it. I'm older, right? You used to call it college preparatory. You were doing college, preparing for college and that sort of thing, or were you looking ahead that way?
I was hoping to go to college on a basketball scholarship, and I was good. I was probably not as good as I thought I was at the time, but I was still pretty good. But I tore my ACL. I had 2 knee surgeries, and after the second surgery, I went back to play, and it wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, right. No, I understand.
Yeah, so I said that's not going to happen.
My lady friend Maggie had the same problem.
Oh yeah,
you'll be meeting her, I expect.
Maggie,
my friend.
yes.
You haven't met Humphrey yet, our dog.
I haven't.
He's almost big as a horse, but anyway.
What kind of dog is he?
Well, it's a mixture of a Labrador and what's a Pomeranian. He's got the legs of a little dog and the body of a big one. He's a great, big, beautiful angel dog. I'm sorry, that's off the track, but
no, not
anyway,
at all.
You were athletic then and everything. And did you like school and so forth? And
I had a hard time sitting still for more than 15 minutes, and I still do. So unless I'm knee deep in something that's really fascinating to me, I bounce around too much. So I can't say I had a curious mind, but I could have used a little bit. I could have used somebody to grab me by the back of the neck and say, "Hey, sit here for 10 minutes and just focus on this and see where it goes. Instead, I was bouncing around a lot, which
I was
sports was good
I was
for.
the same way. I never liked school for that reason because I always wanted to do it. I just had a program I did with my grandkids. They came through last week. I haven't seen them in a few years and everything. And the one kid was 7, and he said they're in a thing called Montessori, and they get to walk around and do what they want. They said it's a different, I guess, progressive idea of education.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit about it.
But I think that education, it was just sit and listen, and yeah, it's sort of linear.
It is, and I think hands-on works a lot better.
That's exactly.
For people
have
like
you heard
myself.
of it? You're not young. You don't have children.
You're trying to get my age out of me, aren't you?
No, not really. I just know you're young and everything.
No, I don't
and
have
vibrant.
children.
No, okay.
My films right now are my babies.
Okay,
so.
good enough. Yeah, but that's Montessori is a way of teaching. It's a philosophy of teaching and education. All this stuff where they're making them take tests and sit up straight. It's a lot of training people to be answerable to an authority figure or something that I don't think necessarily is the best way to bring out the best of what's intellectually there.
Not for everybody. It's very
not
systematic.
For everybody. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it works for certain people, but there are different learning types.
Were you rebellious, socially, politically, or in any other kind of way?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
That's part of the drive of the athletic too, I suppose. Or being stand out, or being Tiger Woods and mentality. When you get to golf, you're really good at it, and. Okay, I'm just fishing around for it.
No,
It was a good upbringing because it's obviously resulted in such a young womanhood. It's just before me now, so it was a good background. Then you did go on to university, or what happened after high school when you left that town?
My family, we didn't really have the money to go to school.
Okay.
My sister ended up putting herself through school over a period of time and working full time, which I thought was a good idea, and I thought I would do the same thing. But when I came here. I started working, and
here to New York.
Yes, so I came here 2.5 weeks, or about that, after high school, like I was saying earlier.
Oh, so you've been here for a long time. You're a New Yorker now.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
I've been here since '95.
Oh, okay.
So now you can calculate my age.
Now I don't have to start talking to you like you're somebody who just got past, Ellis Island or something.
No,
sorry.
Not at all.
So you're in New York.
And I fell in love with the city.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
There's so many different types of people
I know,
here.
it's wonderful. They got 195 countries in the world, apparently. We're going to be talking about some in the Middle East or in Afghanistan and the area. But there's large, sizable communities of 189 of the 195 nations that exist. And everybody in the world is here, which I love. I think that's great. Yeah.
I do too. Some people wouldn't agree. They're not as comfortable with it, but that's what I fell in love with. That and the energy of the city.
I know.
And there's nowhere else. I do a fair bit of traveling, and there's nowhere else in the world that I feel like I can just go to a restaurant, sit at the bar, have dinner, and meet all these different types of people.
I know.
Really
you don't have to go anywhere, really.
Yeah.
They all come here to you. Yeah.
It's true.
Okay, so when did you get, I know you're interested in filmmaking. Did you go to university and do undergrad or something?
So I went straight to acting school.
Okay.
Actually.
Oh, acting. Okay.
Yeah. So I acted for a while. I really loved it. There were two things with it. I wanted to mold and shape the story more.
You want to be a director or a writer?
Yes, I wanted to be on the other side of the camera or off the stage and saying, "Here's how it should be done." And I learned, through making documentaries and working on other films, that I work really well with crew and with talent and getting everybody to move in the same direction. That's
I can see you help us get together here very well.
Mr.
Hitchcock, thank you very much.
Yeah. We'll see if it works.
Yeah, right. No, but that's good. Yeah, well, that's good. My daughter's in theater and everything. Were you theater or film? Were you thinking?
I did both.
Which you like the best?
That's tough.
Yeah.
I think theater. Because the audience is there. I mean, you hear that all the time. And there's a reason you hear it all the time.
It's a different thing. It's had a tough go. It's
a
tough business. Getting worse. I think it's more difficult. I think. Because of all the media that's coming now. Everything's becoming media.
Right.
And everything. She went to Yale at the director's track.
Oh, wow.
So she was really into theater and that kind of stuff. And then she married a fellow from St. Petersburg. They did a project at Yale on Meyerhold, like Stanislavski. And they loved theater. And she was there after having done another thing. I don't want to go into, I love my daughter and she's great and everything. I don't want to go into her background, but you'll probably meet her sometime because I think we're destined to become friends along with a lot of other people here in this great city. But anyway, she did a project there on Meyerhold and it came and they brought 4 or 5 people from the comparable university in Russia, which is St. Petersburg Academy of Theater, and among them was a young man named Rovinsky, Vladimir Rovinsky. They fell in love and got married, and they married. And he's devastatingly smart, and he didn't know any English, but they've come off well, and they've given me these 2 wonderful grandchildren. But she teaches now at theater, and it's really...
Okay.
And Judith Molina, Living Theater, I like, you know, theater is really important. It still is probably that's informed your work toward getting toward film and so forth.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of lessons learned just by watching, I mean, any story that's put
Did you get involved in any way like being on-air talent or doing ads or doing television or doing film or anything? It's a tough business.
It is tough.
Yeah.
I'm not a big seller of myself, so I had a hard time with breaking into that. In that way, but I did some television. I did a little bit of television and also some campaigns, which you know, if you can get them, they pay nicely. But at the same time, you never know when that's going to come, and that's not actually where your heart is. I mean, for me, it wasn't. So
many people want to do that. There aren't enough venues for what people want to do in a general sense. I think the things that are really creative, there aren't enough viable venues for people to have the life of the arts. For instance, because everything's geared toward commerce or something.
Yeah, it's very commercialized.
Something, yeah.
It is, it is.
Yeah. Anyway, so you got there, and then you did get actually involved in film school. Of course, we want to get to the Afghan Solution, this film you made about Afghanistan. We want to get to that pretty quick and everything. But you went to film school, you've learned filmmaking, and that you've gotten into that. No,
I didn't go to film school. I actually, after acting school, I jumped right into, okay, let's be on the other side of the camera. Once I did some things like in film and TV.
Yeah, in front of the camera.
Yes, and once I decided to try the back side of things, I got together with a group of friends and we made a SAG experimental film.
A SAG, Street Actors Guild?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. So after that, I said, okay, how do I do this? So I went around to different companies, making pitches to them. Here's what I think I can do. Here's what I'm learning, and how can I do this with you? How could I help you? And I basically started working.
Good for you.
It was a little at the time.
Yeah, a little tricky. They say, where are all the degrees and everything, or where are all the certificates?
They do look at those things, and most of them close the door because of that. I mean, a lot of them close the door.
But you were out on your own hook, as they say, and you were being autodidact, if you know that term. You're teaching yourself as you go along. I think that's the most important quality.
I think it's a good
quality. Somebody's driven to do a thing like that.
Yeah, I've learned to appreciate it more, but I think it's not necessarily the best quality. And I had contemplated going to film school, and I think at the time it was $30,000 for the year plus, or that's with film costs. By the time I said, I can't afford this, so how do I learn this without going to film school? And I always learned things the hard way anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I jumped in and I said, so I'm going to write this script, I'm going to get these people involved, how much money does it take to, and it was something like $15,000.
To make a film project?
Yes, and it was a feature film. And then I just kept going from there. So I worked for a small production company. They were in the nascent stages. They had branched off from Automatic, a television department from Sony. And they wanted new content, and they wanted somebody to go forward with it, say, here's my idea, here's the plan, here's the budget, and so I started working for them. Okay,
I see. And you learned then, you learned on the job, as it were.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's good and everything. And then you did something about food or something. You did a film about food or something, or you had a...
I did a show called Kids Cook TV.
Good for you, for the kids cooking,
and that was an experience, just working with children. I learned a lot, but that basically involved some organizations, Spoons Across America, Days of Taste, and there was a push to get this program up and running where they had city chefs go into public schools and teach them about nutrition, about salt and sweet, and the different parts of, of taste, and took them to the farmers market, and then they would have them all. The last part of the episode was they would have them all in their restaurant and cook dinner for them.
And you got to, did you get down to where you were doing the design only, or were you actually doing editing and that kind of thing, or how involved did you get in the overall process of creating the product? I mean, did you have editors do it, or you set the template, or
I had an editor. I had an editor, but other than that, I did it myself. I mean, I put together a very small crew, a camera guy, a sound guy, and we went and shot. And
Couldn't you call him a cinematographer? Isn't that a little bit more prestigious?
It depends on what you're shooting.
Really? Okay.
It does. It does. I mean, for that, it was more of a camera guy.
What's the difference between a camera guy and a cinematographer?
A camera guy is somebody who knows the technical aspects. I mean, this is just the way I see it anyway.
Yeah,
I'm sure
okay. No,
people would argue with this.
No, this is on the ground reality, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a camera guy is somebody who knows the technical aspects of the camera, knows how to use it well, but isn't necessarily cinematic or worried about getting a gorgeous shot. And when you're shooting on the go like that, yes, I've learned that I like cinematographers more anyway, but it's more about running and gunning and getting what you can and them knowing how to do it and being able to communicate really well with them.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to do that.
You being able to communicate with them.
Right.
So that you get the shots that you want in order to have the vision for film that you have. Yeah.
Exactly. And you don't need a cinematographer necessarily.
No, but cinematography is like an art. You know,
yes, yes.
You know, Leonardo da Vinci was pretty good with a brush. So was Michelangelo, and some aren't. You know.
Right. And then you have people that are just painters. And I don't mean to make it sound.
No, the arts are all interconnected. I think it's an art.
And a lot of times a camera guy or a camera person is someone who's on their way to becoming a cinematographer as well.
Right, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. It'd be like an apprenticeship or something like that. I had a friend of you might.
I'm so going to get in trouble with my crew for saying that.
No, not at all. No, it's all just it's right there. You get along. Well, you're so amiable. You get along. I can see you could be working with people very well. That's very good.
I love working with my crew.
I had a woman writer who was from Zimbabwe. Her name was Alexandria Fuller. She wrote a book called Scribbling the Cat. She was a writer and everything. It was about, and she said, because in a certain sense the writing is so important, you know, in terms of putting a piece together. And she said that she thinks all writing, at least in the modern era, should be cinematographic. That is, you should be writing as though you're envisioning the context within which is taking place, not just the words.
That's
I think there's something that she thought all writing henceforth should be cinematographic. So it's like a setting that you're doing. So the trees and the wind and the things are taken into account, you know.
Right.
I don't know. Writing is really important.
I like that. I don't know that all of it.
Yeah, right.
Right. But yeah. I understand where she's going. I like that idea. But I also like the room for allowing people to use their own imaginations.
Right, right. Well, that could be done, yeah. So we want to get going, and you got now the major project that you're doing now, and that you're going to be presenting to the Academy, you know, to congratulate, is this, the Afghan Solution. How did you come to that? What led up to it? And let's talk about it. And we're going to show a couple of clips, right? But you've got that, and you're going to be presenting it to the, you know, to a very major group tonight and everything here in New York on the 26th of July. Mm-hmm. But how did you get to the Afghan Solution, as we've got it displayed, the DVD cover here now?
Well, I was shooting a wine show, actually, that I created for the same company that I mentioned earlier. And I was in the middle of the champagne fields in France. Yeah. And we were having a discussion on Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. This was in 2005.
Were you? Have you been political?
Never.
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 Okay.
Never.
Sorry, I just threw that out.
That's quite all right.
Yeah. But you were having this discussion.
We were.
Was that before or after a couple liters of wine?
That was before, believe it or not. I think the decision to go came after.
Right, okay, yeah.
That was earlier in the day.
Yeah.
And the fact that we kept talking about it, because I was there for 5 days shooting, the fact that we kept talking about it,
you were shooting
a
wine thing, yeah.
Yes.
Was it a commercial? Not a commercial, it was a film about wine.
No, it was a television, it was a pilot for a wine show that I created. So.
Okay, is that still going or is that gone?
It wasn't my...
oh, you were working on it.
Well, I created it.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I wrote it, I directed it, I created it.
Good for you. Good,
and I had a great editor come in and help me finish putting it together. But it wasn't, I owned part of it, but not all of it. So it was somebody else's, it was the executive producer's job to sell it. So, so maybe one day that will happen. Maybe
yeah. But that's not your bailiwick, apparently, or your area of greatest expertise, as I understand.
Which is that?
The executive part about the selling and so forth.
The selling part, no, not my area of expertise. You seem to be pretty
comfortable with the business part of the organizational structure.
Well, because I've learned a lot because I've had to. You know, my cup of tea is directing and writing and working with crew, like I said,
right?
You know, and trying to move together with an idea, get everybody going on this.
It's great, isn't it?
I love it.
It must be great, really great. Yeah. Anyway, the discussion about politics in the wine
we were
field.
having it. Well, she was from CNN. She had worked at CNN for a while, and so we just got really. I get passionate about a lot of ideas, and one of them was, what are we doing in Afghanistan? This was 2005, and we had heard it was a victory or a success, and we had moved on to Iraq, which I was actually part of the protests here at the UN.
Good for you. 91, 92?
No, 2003.
Oh, later, okay, okay.
the second
time. Because that had
time.
built up over a long period of time, as you know. Yeah, you're familiar. And so you got yourself educated to the political realities.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And, well, sort of.
Sort of, yeah. But you're also very culturally oriented toward the people, actual people. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've been, like I say, I travel quite a bit, so I'm sensitive to different parts of the world and different cultures.
Right,
so when we got in this discussion, I'm very patriotic, and I have a soft spot in my heart for the military folks.
Okay.
And what I got hung up on was, we have a lot of people in uniform there. This was in 2005, and I was saying we have a lot of people in uniform. What are they doing? And so it was an itch that had started. And when I came back after the wine show, within 6 weeks, I had put a crew together and said, let's go talk to people. Yes, so we were on a plane.
In Afghanistan.
Well, and I came back and I did some ground research, but not enough. So when I got there, I realized that the narrative that I had been hearing here was not the narrative or the reality on the ground at all. So I was fascinated by the people, their resiliency, but I also said, okay, what's going on? Why are we here? What is what we're doing helping? Et cetera.
Right.
So that's how I got cut off.
And that's quite a thing, putting people together to go over. That's a major project, going all the way over to Afghanistan and so forth. You pulled that off, and then you went there and you started shooting according to some sort of script you had, or some sort of idea, or were you actually gathering footage or research, or
all of the above? All of the above.
How many of you were there?
4.
4.
Four on the first trip.
Okay, first trip. And you found it interesting? Did you get more engaged with the whole idea than you had originally when you thought of it up? Did you become more engaged in the reality than you had thought you might be by when you had the idea initially in your head?
Of course, of
you
course.
Did?
I mean, intellectually, the ideas that took me there, I knew those were there, but I didn't realize how attached I would become to figuring out what the real story was, but also just to the people there.
Do you feel you've come to understand it pretty well for Americans, for somebody who had not, as a lot of people don't, and a lot of people are wondering what's going on now? I
think it's like anything else, the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn.
Yeah.
I do know that I understand the basics better than most Americans, I'd say. And that's partly because I've been there a few times, and it's partly because I've spent 4.5, 5 years studying the place. So.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, and how much time have you spent in country there?
Combined about 3 months, which is not a lot of time.
Oh, you can do a lot in 3 months if it's well budgeted, the time and everything.
Right.
And so you got a film, and the film is, what distinguishes the film in your view mostly? I understand you have a great deal of input from people, from the citizens, the actual people, rather than say the talking heads or the political leaders necessarily, and that kind of, if you understand.
I do. I do. So what distinguishes the film is I fought the urge to follow a hot button issue. I fought the urge to do to follow human rights issues, or to get on someone's trail about women's rights. Both of those are very important.
Huge subjects, aren't they?
Hugely
with the
important
Taliban.
too. Yes, pertinent. But I also said I don't think those narratives are going to help us understand what's going on, the bigger picture, or the bigger problems that first need to be dealt with, and then help us deal with them. So I fought the urge to do that. And what I did was I created something, I think, that allows the Afghans to speak for themselves, and I don't see a lot of that out there.
There's a lot of variety among Afghans. There's Pashtun, and there's all kinds of tribal identities. There's Taliban. There's all kinds of links over into Pakistan and that kind of stuff. It's a very, Alexander, we used to call it Bactria when he invaded and so forth. It's the linchpin of geostrategic thinking over the centuries and so forth. Very strategically placed place of the world and everything. It's got huge implications. It's hard to handle it all and everything, but you did that. And congratulations on the film, and may it help inform us all about what the realities are and everything. I wonder, one of the problems in life is there's not enough time to do all the things you would like to do.
So true.
And particularly with the leisurely, and we got the tyranny of time, right? So we want to try and get a couple clips in of the film, and you've selected them, and maybe you could, as they say, set it up. the first clip that we're going to try and show, what it is, what it's trying to do, and it's good with the length of it. And then we'll come back, we'll talk some more, and then we want to get a second clip in too. But could you maybe for us set up a clip from your film, The Afghan Solution?
Sure,
movie?
sure. I'm not positive which one they're showing first. I think they're showing this one. It's part of the beginning of the film, and it has some of the local leaders. We got together for a jirga, which is really interesting to be
like
invited
a town
in.
meeting.
Yeah. To be invited as a woman, that was really fascinating.
Did
you
have to dress differently?
I didn't really dress differently. I wore looser clothing, and I did put I did cover my head with a scarf, but not my face. I did that out of respect, and I think that would have been the right thing to do.
Yeah. And so it's sort of a setup for the film that we might be seeing.
It's not really a setup for the film. I wanted to show them talking about their life under the Taliban rule. Okay. And I also wanted to allow one of the members of parliament and one of the prominent leaders there now, he's a Hazara leader, I wanted to allow him to have a say too, because once we pull out, they will be dealing with some of the same things that they dealt with before.
We are going to pull out in 2014.
We are pulling out, yes.
Yeah, that is definite.
And it's a common enemy, you know, so they're going to be facing it, and we're going to be facing the ramifications of it as well. So I just wanted to show a little taste of that.
Okay, well, let's go. Maybe we're in 4 or 5 minutes or something.
I think it's 3 minutes, something like that.
3 minutes or so. Okay, we're talking with Josie Maynard. Let's run that film. Is this it then?
That's it.
تخیل بکنم در خیالتان اینا شاهد است دمی 5 نقطه می شهر در مابین محل زندگی مردم محل جاهای شکنجه مردم وجود داشت اینا به ترتیبی کرده بودن که صدای اشخاصی که شکنجه میشه به گوش مردم به خوبی برسه
پوسکنایتینگ سلوی قردن لایدینگ پوسکنایتینگ سوی قردن لای بوده تا آخرگاه لای آخرگاه چه ساپتین پوسکنایتینگ وش آزاد کن آدمlar بسلان بس قلگن وش نپرلشرگی آخچگی انت برقم که اول ساقال قوید کلش پل ساقال تراش قل نکتای قل ورا شاوکی ترک خانه ما نسوره
بله بخش میتونم گفتم شنداق بره بزنی آن بزگه شنداق به نظر باشه جهانیانده بزنه کوزو بزگه رقم کور نده بلند شورگه شو مخلوقاتی که شورگه ولده شکنجانه تایگه کیبلده تایگه وزاره آتی ولده نه رقم قل تاربله ولده خول درده و پل حقوق بشر به افغانستان گه یا قدم دنیا گه یا قدم حقوق بشر بزنه اولا وارد سوره میده.
It is natural for tribal leaders to reveal the scars of what has happened and to see that fear as an omen. Among the tribes, the past is a divining rod of things to come.
یکی نگرانی از طالبان که اگر همینطور دوام کرده بره جنگ دوام کرده بره 1 سال 2 سال 3 سال افغانستان هم بازسازی نشوه خود دیگه غیر از مناطق طالب دیگه منطقه هم سرش کار نشوه مردم مایوس شوه خب جامعه جهانی هم ببینه که حل نمیشه در انتخابات بعدی یک رئیس جمهور نو بیاد امریکا رقم گورباچوف که در افغانستان هم برای افغانستان بگه برادر دیگه مارچی در افغانستان برای این قدرت‌های خود بگه بره دیگه باز طالبا شمشیرهای خود گرفته بیاره که خب رفیقای امریکا چطور استین نله قدم باز جنگ شروع کنه دیگه اون زمان سلاح ما گرفته شده خل سلاح شدیم دیگه بعد از اون نمیفهم خزمه چی کار کنیم یک دوم میسته که امی حکومت همه که قوت گرفته بره هر روز ما رو کشته بره زده بره فشار داده بره دیگه دنیا سر ما جهنم جور کنه.
Failure in Afghanistan cannot be an option. If it is an option, then you see again Afghanistan becoming the hub of international terrorism. It will spread like a bushfire to the region and beyond.
Afghanistan falls, Pakistan then, and now you have Islamic extremists running these two countries. And it spreads up into Central Asia. That's the worst that could happen. I don't know what that world's going to look like. But that will be a very different one than we live in now, that's for sure.
So that's
that's really interesting. You know, it got that in. You know, they're saying Pakistan. We're going to air a program tomorrow after your program with General Anis Bagwa. He was the advisor to President Musharraf. He's general officer, major general, and he's now advising the guy who's emerging in Pakistan, likely to become the president, or the head political person in Pakistan. The two countries are very closely linked, are they not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was part of going back to the narrative. When I went in, the narrative was we should back one guy. Our guy was Karzai. Was back a central government, and everybody else would coalesce around him. And never mind that it's an ethnically and regionally diverse country.
It truly is it not? Right?
It really is.
You got a sense that you got Tajik, you got all these different. Maybe you could spell that out. Just how you got Pashtun,
Tajik, Hazara, Uzbek, Turkmen.
Yeah,
I mean, those are the main ones. You've got Aimak. You have a lot of different ones.
And then you have the Pashtun, and then you have Taliban down Kandahar, and then you have the Northern Alliance, which was part of a rivalry that there was there that's been taken advantage of. Then you had the Soviets invade, then they were forced out, and then the Americans, and that's the linchpin of. He heard the person say, if you have it go, if it doesn't work, and what that it is something we're all interested in. What's going to happen after 2014 or whatever? But that's a geostrategic center that has been focused on ever since Alexander went there and conquered it and saw it as a strategic point. It was the basis of all George Kennan's thinking of that part of the world, that heartland.
Right.
So it really is a strategic area of great importance. And what is your sense? Maybe we can get to. We're going to try to get to a second clip that, but it really is important, isn't it? You picked a very important area of the world to be concerned.
Yes, it's important. I mean, for them first, I think. But if not for them, I always say, then what about for us? Yeah. Because yes, the place will break into civil war, in my opinion. But what does that mean for the United States and for the West?
This is if we leave, and there's not an
when we leave. When we
leave.
Well, there are so many issues.
Yeah.
And they've only been flamed over the lack of progress, the lack of material hope by the local population losing hope over certain promises that were never fulfilled.
Right. A lot of corruption, I think.
A lot of corruption.
A lot of corruption.
Yes, but we set up the system. It could be President Karzai, who is corrupt.
Yeah, right.
But you could call it President X, the system that we set up. And I say we, the United States, because we did set the system up. And we did strong-arm them into adopting this constitution that gives it the country more of a king-like structure.
That did come out of the Jirga Loga, or what do you call it?
Jirga?
It came out of that kind of town meeting, kind of tribal gathering kind of system that's traditional to them.
Kind of, but we were still strong-arming them.
Yeah, right.
So it was in Bonn, Germany in December of 2001. And so a lot of the communities didn't want to get behind this constitution because they said this doesn't represent, this is not what we're looking for. But we said, you know what, let's fast track this, let's get out of here, so sign it and we'll help you change it later.
Right.
And we haven't helped them change it. And so it's resulted in a structure that the president has king-like powers. I mean, he has 2 vice presidents. Similar to ours, not so different. I could live with that. He has the upper and lower house, but he appoints a third of the upper house.
Wow.
And
that's power, yeah.
And he also appoints every governor, 34 provinces.
Okay.
So can you imagine our president appointing all of our governors?
And the governors have a lot of authority. There's a great deal of tribal identity, is there not?
Yes, and if you're allowing one person from the center to appoint all these people, that's going to disrupt a lot of things, as you can imagine. But that's not even the cherry on top. The president also appoints the local mayors and the police chiefs.
Oh boy, right down to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a system that's set up for breeding corruption. I mean, never mind grinding progress to a screeching halt.
Yeah, and it has.
Right. And it has.
And you got these deep-seated animosities and so forth. And I wonder what. And they said we have bases, don't we? The United States has bases in all the stans. I think we surround everywhere. I think we've got them up in Tajikistan and so forth. And we're putting in these drones now. Do you get any effect of that? Whether the drones that are being brought with no death on the side of a pilot or anything like that, or even just Hellfire missiles and that kind of thing delivering down on people. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with deaths of civilians that are being targeted from Nevada target sites with drones and that kind of thing? Or did you get into any of the animosity toward the United States that's brewing in Afghanistan or in Pakistan?
Sure. I think the animosity brewing towards the United States and Afghanistan has been bubbling up a little bit higher every year, but I say they still remain hopeful and they still remain happy that we're there. They don't want us to leave.
They being, there must be varying sentiments and so forth.
Sure, of course. I mean, you have the people that are actually fighting.
What's the reality on the ground of the political, sociological identity structure of the people of Pakistan as you understand it?
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, how do they identify themselves? Is it tribal? Is it
tribal, political?
People, yeah.
I mean, different, absolutely different within Pakistan and within Afghanistan.
Yeah, I see.
But I mean, if you're talking about the Pashtuns, which is the bigger minority group in Afghanistan, they're split. They were split by the Durand Line in the 1848 or 1849,
okay.
And that created huge insecurity issues, which we're still dealing with today.
Right.
So I think it's in Pakistan's interest to quell that or to help them feel. So their interests in Afghanistan are never really clear.
Yeah.
It's they see it in their interest for the most part for Afghanistan to be destabilized.
Yeah. I think there's a great number of people, particularly in the military, political classes of Pakistan, who's particularly military, their particular thing is something that isn't paid much attention to by the world at large, is the issue of Kashmir and India.
Yeah, you don't hear much about that now.
You don't hear it here, but you do there.
Oh, sure,
And it motivates them. And I know I was with some people when they blew up their atomic bomb. They are, after all, now an atomic nation, Mr. Khan and so forth. And there was a group of them when they celebrated that they had gotten a bomb, an atomic bomb. An Islamic bomb, some people call it. And they're talking about how this could be the site of an Islamic they use the word terrorist, or what are they, an Islamic uprising against the presumed ability of the Western model to impose its imperial view of the world upon the world, as the British had done before them and so forth, right? So do you think there's a danger of there being a general shaking off of the Western imperialist model that's been held and picked up? The British model has been picked up by the United States with our notion of institutions that ought to be imposed are good everywhere in the world? Or do you think there's going to be a revolt among the Ummah of the Islam, 1.5 billion people? Is it going to be something that could come out of Afghanistan, Pakistan, could spread to other parts of the broader Islamic Ummah?
I hope that's
in opposition to the established order that claims historical legitimacy, like led by us and our allies.
I hope that's not true. I do see that as a
that's a danger.
A danger, a very real possibility.
A real possibility.
It is a possibility, but you have to look at you have to come back home and look at what's going on here.
Yeah, well, there's some problems here too.
With the problems I see in Afghanistan, I blame that on the State Department and I blame it on the administration, this one and the previous one. And we live in a time where the government doesn't really have its own opinion. It's more of the groupthink, and once the group gets together and decides what the groupthink is, everybody else is kind of sidelined.
The groupthink of what's loosely termed the establishment, the political business establishment.
I don't know about business establishment, not with Afghanistan, no.
Oh, okay. You have these contractors too, you Blackwater, and the kind of things. You got more, I'm not sure, in some parts of the world you have more civilian contractors than you do actual military boots on the ground, but it's not thought of as being military, but it is a military backup. A lot of that's there. That's a new feature, is it not, also?
Yes.
Of the region?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd have to actually research that more to know for sure. But I mean, to the extent that they're now there, yes, probably.
Yeah, and that's an extension of American power, essentially. We're just sending a whole bunch of.
Well, that's where the commercialism comes into play too, and that's where things get a little gray. In my opinion. But I did interview Blackwater, and they do also do good work, not just some of the bad things that you hear about.
Okay, do you think that's oversold, the Blackwater and the okay?
Yeah, I think it's one of the hot. I don't know. I'd call it oversold, but I mean, they've made mistakes just like a lot of the companies there have made mistakes. But it's one of those hot button issues that serve to distract from the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, we've been there for 10 years. Has it helped?
Yeah.
You know, should we still be there? Should we be pulling out? Should we not be pulling out?
Yeah.
Those are the things that need to be addressed. Not, you know, as far as.
And they're there because they think that's where the 9/11 came from, or was it? It was a safe haven for radically inclined militant people that go into big buildings and with airplanes and things like that, and are fanatic, huh? Now that's what they're doing. Okay, now one of the problems again is this tyranny of time, because you're too damn interesting. We could talk to you
There's so many. Every section of the film could be its own film.
I know. That's the problem with life. It's too interesting. Slow down, right?
True.
But in any case, we do have, and what we want to get to is these things come up and everything. But let's see if we can't get to another clip. Okay.
Okay.
We want to make sure we get it in, and we want to let people know how they can get a copy of your Afghan. So how long is the film overall?
55 minutes.
55.
It started at 2.5 hours, and then I said, okay, let's cut this down. And then there have been variations of the film. This is the third cut and the final cut.
This is the final cut. And is it hard? That's really hard to do. I find trying to get something out it's harder. This is a blibbit where you can put so much sausage in a casing or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know,
I do.
So there's a problem with that, and it's really hard cutting
things out.
It's hard cutting things. It's harder to cut things out than it is to add.
It is. It absolutely is, especially when you shoot so many fascinating interviews and have
you've got
these
a
great
commitment to so many. Okay, here comes the second one.
It would be similar to our National Guard in the United States, and then we can back them up, but they can do the fighting. They don't need us to do the fighting. Right now, by building a force in Kabul and sending more U.S. troops, we've made them totally vulnerable if we leave.
I've been with Ismail Khan. I've been with Mahakek. I've seen the commitment. The Afghan people are very much committed to those leaders. And they're committed because they see those leaders as people who protect their community.
So they're ready to fight. And they want to fight, but we won't let them.
Because somehow, by letting them fight, we undermine our idea of building a strong, centralized state. How can you have local leaders fighting without it being done under the control of a strong Afghan national army? And yet we don't even look at our own history, because we didn't have a strong national army when we fought the Revolutionary War. We had communities and states and militias fighting the British. We've abandoned our own history, and we've ignored the Afghan history. And we've come up with something that maybe sounds really great in a political science discussion at Harvard, but it really has no place in Afghanistan.
Okay, we come back to us then. Okay, we're back on that. That was another thing that got into some of the geopolitics and so forth.
Right, and that clip actually was missing the first part of it, which was the U.S. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher talking. Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, he was talking.
What was he saying? Can you fill us in?
He was talking about the idea that we've ignored. Some of the same thing that Mr. Santos was just saying, but he was talking about the Afghans are capable of fighting for themselves. They need support, but we're ignoring the things that worked going in, and that's one of the bigger points of this film.
Right.
There were two things ignored. And one of them was the Constitution, like I was telling you about, that needs to change. And the other one was what actually worked in the days after 9/11, because we went in with less than 200 troops, and we defeated the Taliban with the Northern Alliance.
With the Northern Alliance,
and then at the peak last year, we were at 150,000 troops, and we're not making progress. So making progress in small amounts, it would be argued, but the overall big picture, we're not winning. And so I said, why don't we just go back and look at what did work? And that was working with the Northern Alliance and the communities on the ground, because they were able to mobilize their communities because those people are behind them, you know? So that was a big part. That's a big part of the film as well.
And that's one of the things you think might be something we could learn from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And also it goes back, I think it's really interesting to take a historical perspective, because that was the area that was known as Bactria to Alexander the Great. And that's been the lodestar, that's been the center of geostrategic thinking that's informed the world. George Kennan, like we mentioned earlier, they've called that's part of what they call the heartland. And that's where all the argument with the Soviet Union and so forth, not ideological, but just geopolitical, geography, is whoever controls the North European plain controls the heartland, that part of the Eurasian landmass that is invulnerable to sea power. Because you have a conflict between traditionally sea power and land power, internal logistics and that. And whoever controls the world, the heartland of the Eurasian, controls the world island, the Eurasian landmass with Africa.
Right.
Who controls the world island controls the world. That's what informed containment. We wanted to, it became Soviet, it became socialist. And we had a containment theory that contained them, and then the Soviet Union imploded. And all of this is going on that's sort of throwing into a cocktail a lot of the traditional strategic thinking, don't you think?
I agree.
What's the major problem that we have in terms of, and that Constitution that was written, or was, I thought I heard you say it was sort of in a sense forced upon them.
It was forced upon
them. And that
them.
was forced upon them because we have an idea of the legitimacy of a model that we have in our mind, in terms of the way the world ought to be done. Various groups
it was more about fast tracking. It was more about fast tracking.
Okay, fill us in, yeah.
Well, I mean, going back to what you were saying, the person that, the people that control that northern part of the country, have
Tajik and Turkic.
Well, they're Turkmen, Tajiks, and Uzbeks.
Right, and we have bases.
And there are pockets of all the different
and some of the
tribes
stands,
around.
The stands that are going. We have bases up there.
Yes,
I mean,
do.
the United States
we do.
does. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Those people, those tribes represent 60 combined, represent 60% of the population, and
this is the north of Afghanistan.
The north and parts of the west.
Yeah,
as well.
and then it blends into the other. There's one group up there that speaks Farsi.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That's Iran. That brings in Iran, right? Okay, yeah.
Persian, and I mean,
Persian,
it actually it goes. It's kind of like a blanket. It goes through all of northern Afghanistan.
And then you got some of
with different dialects.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Where was I?
Well, we're talking about the strategic placement of that part of the world, and where it fits into.
Well, I was saying that 60% of the population has been disenfranchised. I was at a conference in Berlin. It was hosted by the Aspen Institute in January.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
And the idea was they were going to get some of the northern and western leaders to sit down at the table with a codel of U.S. congressmen and women, one woman. And they were going to discuss, okay, you guys have been saying for a long time you're left out of the process. We call it a democracy, but like I was saying earlier, it's not really a democracy. So what do you think going forward? What do you think are the best way? What's the best way forward? When I went to that conference, I was blown away by the openness on both sides, but I was also really appalled that people tried to prohibit this meeting from even taking place. The Aspen Institute got a lot of heat for it in Berlin.
Why would people want to not allow this?
Because it goes against the groupthink.
Well, now what's the, spell it out a little bit. What do you mean? The groupthink being? The
groupthink has been to stay on this course, stay the course. And the course that we set in the beginning was coalescing behind one person, behind a centralized government. Yes, yes. So anybody that came in and said, well, hold on a second, this isn't going to work, and here's why it's not going to work.
Because there's such diversity. You want a more confederated thing more than a federated.
We want a federalism.
Yeah, or federalism.
They were labeled as bad guys, or you're trying to work against the establishment, and stories came out against them. Some of them may be true. I thought a lot of them that I found out were not true.
Okay.
So these guys are trying to get together. They formed a new political party, which has been frowned upon, and they're coming up with different solutions. They're coming up with different ideas and saying we're all willing to work together. And it's easy to point the finger at them and say, well, you didn't work together before during the Civil War, and of course they didn't work together in the Civil War, but things have changed, and they've gone through a lot, and the Afghans are not willing to go backwards. So I see a lot of progress, on their end, and they are capable of running their own country, even from a military aspect. I mean, same thing with that. We got behind this idea of building one national army. Instead of even focusing on national police, we got behind this idea that one army is going to coalesce around this leader.
And that is working?
No.
No.
No, they've got a 50% defection rate.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
that's a little unworkable, is it not?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I mean, even
Go
with
home
the police
and grow
force.
poppies.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And when we pull out, guess what?
Yeah, right.
And the police force, too. I mean, they started creating a police force, in my opinion, too late. I think they should have focused on that before the National Army. But now they have somewhat of a police force, and they're pretty well trained, pretty well equipped, but not really paid. So that's an insecurity force to me,
So are you, I was thinking of that thing about a constitution and that sort of thing. And, you know, you have history, don't you? We're part of a historical thing that's going on. And let's just say 500 years ago, Columbus discovered the New World, and Europe began to have a big sway over things. And the institutions of Europe became part of what was seen in the world. And we had Rome, we had an empire. And they extended way out and went for about 1,000 years, and it brought aqueducts and civilization and so on. Then there was a overthrow of that, and then you had a free feudal order in Europe for about 1,000 years, where the idea of legitimacy held with hereditary families, the king. And then it was all measured through that. So that was thought of as, they got finally, they call it the divine right of kings. They would invoke the creator and say that they have that, they were historically legitimate. Then we had the Industrial Revolution, the Adam Smith, 1776, Revolution in the United States and so forth. And a new order was established that questioned the old order that had been in place. And we have an order that more or less has become the model, wouldn't you think, that is by the so-called leadership element of the world. The model that has historical legitimacy is essentially the one that was born in the United States, with variations in terms of what we call democracy and the institutions of rule by law and constitutional principles. They have this idea of natural law, John Locke, all this kind of thinking. That's the model that is thought of as being historically legitimate. And one wonders if it's come to a point where that system that is calling itself historically legitimate, led by the United States by and large, the institutions of the United Nations follow upon all of that, that system that's in place is not adequate to what the future requires, and there's a huge change that's blowing in the wind. Bobby Dylan would have said, if he were still 20 years old like he was, on his finger on the zeitgeist. We're in that kind of a moment where there's a qualitative change needed, that the old order is in fact an AFGHAN regime that's going to be challenged by a great number of people because it's unworkable in terms of releasing the energy of a liberated humanity in a way that's never been possible. At the same time, we have weapons that could wipe out the entire species. It's a new existential reality, and there's got to come something new other than the reifying of the outdated institutions that
more people have to have a say in their own destiny. I mean, I don't believe we should be policing the world, but if we are, yes, if we are going to help countries establish a new institution and call it a democracy, then we have to actually put that template in place. You can't go around labeling some of these dictatorships that we prop up in Africa or in Afghanistan.
Mubarak for 40 years.
You can't go around labeling these as democracy. It does nobody any good.
Right.
So if we
in fact, we become the enemy of those. If there's one that's real democracy, we would overthrow them. Allende in Chile, and others. We would overthrow anything that is challenging the superpower status of the model being dictated by the United States, because we're the power du jour, like Rome was and the hereditary families. But our system is not adequate comprehensively as a design template for the operating manual for spaceship Earth that the future requires. Do you understand?
I do, I do.
And where would that be coming from? Are there any thoughts that might be able to come as a mass of humanity, 1.5 billion Islamic? There could be opposition on a serious enough scale to question the capitalist, you call it imperialist, if they would in their own name, model that we want to have, is historically legitimate. Follow us because we've got it together and we're the leader, just like Rome would do. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do. But I see too many positive examples. Afghanistan is a good example. I see too many young people getting up every day, putting on their only suit to go to work and to figure out how to feed their families. But I also saw a lot of politicians.
You're talking now in the United States, or
I'm
where?
talking within Afghanistan as an
Afghanistan,
example. I see them saying democracy, the idea of democracy actually works. And it's a great idea because we all have say, we all have skin in the game, and we're all going to move forward together. We're all a part of this.
Do you think that is characteristic of world society? That we all have skin in the game, or is it a matter of we have an economic plutocracy, certainly.
Sure.
All the capital assets are owned by a tiny plutocratic class, are they not?
Yes.
In every country and in the international order, And it's the capital assets that are responsible for production increasing. You get an algorithm can do the work of 50,000 clerks.
Right. You do like to think big picture, don't you?
Well, I think it's time for that.
I absolutely agree.
And we don't have an economic. Can you have a so-called democracy, political democracy? You get to vote every 4 years and have an economic plutocracy. The wealth concentration is becoming more and more concentrated in fewer super wealthy hands. It seems to be the model that's being asserted as relevant historically within the zeitgeist, within the evolution and larger, is not adequate in a serious systems way to what's required. And where would that come from if a new change is required? And where would Islam fit into that if that's something that might be part of a thing challenging the historical assumption of legitimacy by the people who have a system being reified that is outdated and not adequate to what's required? If you can follow.
I did. And what happens when the growing or the shrinking middle class becomes a smaller cushion between the upper echelon and all the other
Absolutely. Don't you see it happening? It's happening here. It's happening.
It's absolutely
and
happening.
And you got this movement, Occupy. It's got it's all over the world. They got Prout in India, and you got this new fellow moving in Pakistan. It's just questioning, and he's going to be the new leader within a few months. The cricket player, the fellow that's becoming a major, he's going to be the major one. His whole thing is a fundamental reform along occupied terms. He did a thing with Assange the other night on Russian television, you know.
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah. Well, wasn't it Jefferson that said we need a good revolution every 10 years for democracy to be able to work?
I think it's right, and we ought to have one. He also wrote a good Bible, too, that did a lot of
So why are we asleep? What's it going to take to wake us up?
Well, James Joyce had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. We may be coming into a time of qualitative transformation in evolutionary terms. Not political terms.
And bringing it back down to this example, I was saying going in, the American public doesn't 7 years ago now, going into Afghanistan, I said the American public, they didn't care, they don't have the patience for this, they want to get in and get out and pass it on to the UN, let somebody else take care of it. But now I'm looking at the situation differently, and I'm saying we actually had a ton of patience. We're there. We should have run out of patience 5 years ago. Why aren't we demanding these changes? And I don't know if we're asleep. I know that we're distracted by the economy. I know that we're worried about, are we going to have our house next year? Are we going to put our kids through school? But there's also a bit of complacency there, or what's distance, because we don't all have skin in the game. We do, but we don't know it. We don't have the more material example of that would be we have family members or ourselves are in the military, so we actually have to put ourselves on the line.
I heard you say
skin.
Support of them. And we don't have the draft anymore.
Right.
We used to have a draft. I had to go in the Army. I didn't like it.
Did you?
Yeah, I had to draft. They drafted me. I'm older. They had to draft us. Now you don't have that. You don't have that. You got a new kind of situation. It's very challenging, and that's part of the world. And it's just that there's very little systems thinking as far as everything concerned. But so are you optimistic or pessimistic for the human prospect, young lady? What do you think?
I think that depends on
weapons,
the day.
Do you realize the weapons are species lethal since about 1970? They could kill every single human being with the thermonuclear weapons that could be set off at any moment. I wonder if the young people are still aware of that. We were very aware of that.
I think we're too busy doing other things.
Trying to survive, huh?
Partly, and we're also just busy with TV, commercialism, the nonsense. The nonsense, the noise.
But we also have an equally existentially significant ability to take care of everyone that we haven't had historically. We could have a liberated humanity within an ecological context that we have a design capability to have. But so it's a question, are we going to liberate humanity or are we going to annihilate it? When it comes down to it, do you have a vision of that? And your film could help inform us in the right direction, perhaps, huh?
Hopefully. I mean, on a much smaller scale, but
Josie. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
Josie Maynard is her name. She's the director and producer of this film, The Afghan Solution. You've seen it. It's coming out now, and it'll be recommended by one and all. And we can show it here if you want to show it. Congratulations on putting the film together.
Thank you.
This is exactly what we need, is some understanding of things in a new patina, a new way.
Well, that's one of the reasons it's not out, because it's not part of the groupthink.
Okay, it's not part of the group thing.
Yes,
It's something
yes.
fresh and new, so that's something to be recommended. Josie, thanks a lot for
Thank you
coming.
very much for
Great
having me.
pleasure. Beginning of a beautiful friendship, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. That's it for now. We'll be coming up with the man who's in league with the man who's emerging as the leader over the next months ahead in the country of Pakistan, right cheek by jowl with where you've been covering.
Maybe I can give you some notes.
Okay, good. We'll take them. We'll take
Okay.
any notes.